for Education. And could I ask Michelle to do a roll call?
Yep, certainly. We have only one apology, and that's from Mike Day. Alexander Roberts said he'd be a little bit late, so he will be here. So if I do a roll call now, Lyndon Jones.
Present.
Cyril Anderson.
Present.
Mike Dirk.
Present.
Stephen Gallagher.
Yes.
David Halliwell.
Present.
Beth Hopkins.
Present.
Linda James.
Present.
Sue Jones.
Present.
Miles Langstone. He was here a minute ago, wasn't he?
Yeah, he has come to that, right.
Linda Tyler Lloyd.
Present.
We also have Councillor Jennifer Rayner, Cabinet Member. Helen Morgan Rees, Director of Education. We have Amanda Taylor, Head of the PRU and Behaviour Support Unit. And for the item on 21st Century Schools, we have Brian Rolls and Louise Herbert Evans. Over to you, Lyndon.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. Are there disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? No.
Yes, sorry, Lyndon.
Right, yes.
I have a son working for the Education Department.
Right, fine. Any others? No. Okay. Then you've got public questions. I understand there aren't any, Michelle.
No public questions today.
Okay, so we go straight into number 5, racing through the agenda, and that's education other than at schools. EOTAS, and could I know that Councillor Jen Rayner and Amanda Taylor are going to give us a briefing. Jen, Amanda, who wants to start?
Shall I briefly start before
Excellent.
Amanda
Yeah, thank you.
Takes you through the details? Yesterday there was the official opening of the PRU over at Cocket, and it's just a reminder to everyone, the PRU is just part of the wider EOTAS strategy, which is really important to carry forward. There has been up to now a sort of, oh, well, it's the buildings there, that's it, done and dusted. That's really just the serious bit of the work, starting and going wider afield. So with that information, I'll hand you over to Amanda, who will talk you through the whole EOTAS strategy. Thanks.
Great, thanks for that introduction. Amanda.
Thank you. Can I just ask, have you got the presentation that I've prepared, or did you want me to share the screen?
I can pop it up if you like. I don't know if that's easier for you. Let's have a look. I've got it here. Yeah, let me share it now.
That would probably be easier because we can all then glance at it.
Taking a little while to. Can you see?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
Slideshow. Sorry, my computer's a little slow. There we are. Can everyone see?
Yeah, it's up on the screen.
Yeah.
Perfect. There we are. Over to Amanda.
Amanda's on mute.
Yeah.
Apologies. Okay, I just wanted to reiterate really in terms of what Councillor Rayner has just said, and that very much is that the building is very much a small part of the work that has been going on since, as Cabinet, you approved the plan for the overhaul of AOTUS provision, and we've very much taken that paper and used that as the Bible in terms of where we go next. So as you're aware, we've now got the new build. We've got a wonderful bespoke PRU facility, which is sharing the same site as Cocket House, but is very much bespoke to our needs. But as part of that, we've got a whole service that in effect is far greater than just the new building, and that's involved a thorough review in line with the recommendations, and also a revision of all our policies, not just the policy for the pupil referral unit, but the wider policies around AOTUS provision in Swansea, and also our behaviour support strategy. So we've looked across at a strategic level, and then at the operational practice at all levels. So our operational practice within the PRU, the operational practice within the behaviour support team, and within the home tuition team. As a reminder, and going back, I'm not sure if you want to go on to move the slides on, and onto the next slide. And again, there we go. So the report highlighted some key recommendations, and they in effect have been the Bible and the footprint that we've worked towards at where we are now. So the report for Cabinet highlighted the focus on early intervention and appropriate intervention to support the universal provision. So as part of that, we've established a prevention and early intervention team and looked at the work of the behaviour support team. So we can now offer specialist area support for schools to build capacity. We've got a specialist teacher for ASD, autistic spectrum disorder and complex needs, as well as a specialist teacher for behaviour support, as well as the appointment of 0.5 education psychologists will be joining us hopefully in September, and their work will be focused on building the universal provision across all schools in Swansea to support young people from falling out of mainstream and becoming at risk of AOTUS. So we'll be launching in September the Elsa Scheme. It's an initiative looking at emotional literacy support assistance. It's been running in many authorities across Wales for many years. And it's very much around building up capacity of key individuals in school that will be able to offer interventions and support through their own capacity within school and identifying young people, but also having an educational psychologist to provide the training and support to them, and have that supervision to them to support them in their own caseloads. As part of that, we'll be looking at supporting the Autistic Friendly Schools initiative with the person that's been appointed as the specialist teacher for ASD and complex needs, and she'll also be running a tapas menu of support to schools, so they'll be able to have bite-sized online support as well as bespoke whole school support to support strategies around complex needs and ASD. And a similar provision with the behaviour support specialist. Where we've got young people then who have been identified as needing more targeted support, the behaviour support team will pick up their referrals and provide that support at an individual level, but also tie in with the team to make sure that the support that they're offering is also built into the overall capacity of the school. So we're focusing at the strategic level as well as the intervention level. As part of that process as well, we've then looked at where the next steps are. So again, in line with the service review and the Cabinet paper, the halfway house that we had an interim model running where we were providing some support but had nowhere for those young people to go. The new building offers 2 classes, 14 places for young people who would need a part-time temporary provision. So young people will be able to be referred via the AOTUS panel and come in for up to 2 to 3 terms on a 50% in school, 50% with us basis, and have that support that they would need to prevent them coming out for any longer. And that ties in with the work of the behaviour support team. So on entry with us, we'd also be doing referrals and parental consent to the behaviour support team. So when they're in mainstream, not only will they have the support from our staff, but they'll also have an intensive package of support from the behaviour support team as well to prevent them from actually coming out again. We've looked as part of that early identification and intervention as well in the devolved funding to secondary schools, and I've reported to Scrutiny on that before. So we continue to devolve 700,000 to secondary schools for them to target young people in Key Stage 4 to support them from falling out. I collect the reports. They don't get the funding in any year until I've had reports on spend and been able to look through those for the previous year, and they all comply really well with that. There's a lot of overlap in terms of what they do, but there are very bespoke provisions being offered in schools as well, from schools that have got their own small classes and intervention areas for young people who are finding it difficult to manage and regulate behaviour in mainstream, right the way through to an offer in terms of their suite curriculum, Prince's Trust, or accessing external providers such as Military Prep, Inspire, etc. So there's a whole range of work that's been done. I'm just having the reports from the last year's spend coming in, and it's interesting to look at how they've used the money more flexibly with COVID to support those targeted young people and provided more intensive home tuition type support for young people, using the funding to do that, to keep them engaged and not to lose them. Obviously, we've looked at the development of a single build model, and we've talked about the building, but also the co-location of services. So all the services that I've talked about are co-located within the new Maestera building and come under the leadership of myself and the deputy. We've had a review of our leadership structure, again in line with the cabinet recommendations, and we now have a structure where we have myself as overall head teacher. We have a deputy that has overview of all services, and then we have an assistant head structure across the PRU, where we've divided what were the old centres, if you like, into different phases. So we have Tŷ Porffor, which offers 21 planned places for our primary provision. We have Tŷ Canol, which is our halfway house and offering 14 planned places from across primary and up to Key Stage 3. We have Tŷ Glas, which is our we've increased provision as identified in the paper for young people with mental health and anxiety needs. So we've increased the provision from 28 planned places to 35 planned places, and they come from year 7 through to year 11. And then we've combined what was Arfon Key Stage 3 and Bronda Key Stage 4, where we offer 28 planned places at Key Stage 3 in Tŷ Gwyrdd and 60 planned places in Key Stage 4 in Tŷ Gwyrdd. As well as that, then, we've looked at the greater emphasis on reintegration back into mainstream schools. So we're in the process of revising the whole EOTAS policy for Swansea, but we've also revised our own prospectus and our own admission processes, and we've developed and almost, I mean, we started calling it the 2-pager. It's 4 pages. Every time I call it the 2-pager, my deputy reminds me that it's 4 pages. But we've developed what we are, our purpose and our remit, which clearly puts reintegration at the centre of that, and the fact that we need to work together with schools with the main aim of supporting young people either back into mainstream or supporting their journey back into further education and employment. And our admissions paperwork has all been amended to make sure that right from the beginning, parents and schools are signing up with the knowledge that that is the intention, that we will have that revolving door for as many pupils that can manage it, and the support will be around that intention. And also then, in terms of a more cohesive approach to working with children and young people who are at risk of needing EOTAS services and having a more challenging and family-based need. So we now RAG rate all the pupils that are with us, and they're rated, and every pupil, regardless of the RAG rating, is given a key worker. But we've revised the work of our support work team so that they are able to provide targeted support, but use systems aligned to the early help hubs, and we're working with social services to align the work of our support workers with them. So every pupil gets a key worker. About 30% of pupils get RAG rated as green, and we've revised our level 40As, and they're part of the wellbeing team and they form part of the key work role. but all children then, so we've got just under 70% of our children are RAG rated amber or red, and they will have the direct work of a support worker who will not just do the work with the young person, but they'll also do the family-based work as well. And the intention then is, if they are escalating into statutory services, whilst the social worker may hold the plan for that young person, they can still charge the actual family work and the direct pupil work to the support worker to do it. So we maintain the same person with that family and young person at all times. I'm just checking because I'm going off a slightly different version that you have there, that we're on the same one, because I think you might have moved. If I go to the next slide, which is the programme delivery and the focus on the early identification and appropriate intervention. So I'm on the first, I can see you've moved ahead, but I'm on the first programme delivery. So I've talked about the review of the behaviour policy. We've now got a clear strategy in place offering that continuous support that we shared. I've lost time with COVID, but about 18 months ago with schools, and they're aware of that and they've had that information. I've done work with the elencos of schools and I've met with ACCA and SCASH around that. And then we've also got the development and enhancement of the support team that I've talked about. In terms of the programme delivery, we've talked about the 700,000 devolved. I've talked about your plan places. I'm sorry, I'm going off a slightly different slide. I've talked about it. I've actually done it all without looking at my slides. Look, that'll teach me. So really, what I've got then are some photographs for you of the new build for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to come and look. What we've had to do in order to move into the new build is the work. We had 4 different centres, so we've looked at aligning all our systems and our policies before we went in. So we did a lot of work in terms of our curriculum development. The new curriculum offered us a massive opportunity, particularly looking at the 4 core purposes, which were really, you know, a joy for us in terms of having those central to our purpose, but also looking at the emphasis on well-being. So we've reviewed all of our curriculum delivery and we've used the building to support that. So in the appointment of staff, we've now got an outdoor learning coordinator because we really want to look at the outdoor learning opportunities for young people who find it very difficult to stay in a class-based scenario for a whole day. So we've got the developments with agencies such as we've got a new site that we've managed to get in Millwood in Gower, where we can run our own forest schools there, but we're also developing our own sites and have that registered as a forest school site. We've also now become registered with the Duke of Edinburgh Award, and we've got children actually out today, bless them, in the rain doing a 3.5 mile hike. And started to look at the site in terms of how we can develop that in terms of community interest. So the children are starting to look at more community-based work. And the voice of the child has been paramount in that process. So they've been involved in the naming of the building, the naming of the houses, they've designed our motto, and they've designed our logo that we're really, really proud of, because it doesn't just involve one child's design, which was the tree, and she used her thumbprints to do it, but then every child contributed in the final design by using their thumbprints. And that was quite spontaneous in the way that was driven, but it has meant that the children that have come here now have got a greater ownership of their building and of where they are. And the photographs you can see, they offer us so many more opportunities in terms of the internal building. Each phase has its own intervention suite, if you like, as well as the classrooms. Classrooms are purpose designed. We've looked very much at security. We've looked very much at the colour scheme. We have a high number of young people with ASD, so we've kept the colours very neutral. They've got one colour for each phase that forms the identity for them, but everything else is kept very, very neutral and calms everything down. But where young people are escalating, either because of anxiety or because they're finding it difficult to regulate their behaviour, we've got a suite of rooms where we can either use sensory therapeutic approaches or we can have a calm down approach where we've got sofas that they can sit down. We've got spaces where they can have counselling, where they can meet with the educational psychologist or other support services. We've got spaces where we can hold restorative circles to actually work together to support young people in coming together following disputes and making amends. So the space that's offered has already, within the last few months, had huge impacts upon things like our HS3s, so dramatically reduced, where we have acts of aggression against staff. Our exclusions have dramatically reduced, where we're able to contain young people and give them space where they can actually reduce their anxiety levels or regulate their emotions better. And the sense of people being settled, I think, is the best way to say that. The sense of people coming in with a common purpose, the sense of teamwork and camaraderie, and having those little snippets from children where they're saying they feel far happier here, and even where we've got young people who are not particularly happy and they're not in a good place in their lives, the fact that we feel that we can offer them that bespoke support, whether it be a therapeutic approach in a space that we've now got, we didn't have before. Watching young people, I was watching them cooking on little gas cans to prepare for the Duke of Ed out in the grounds last week, and having the chat around their little sort of mini campfire, if you like. The dialogue that's going on. We're watching young people with anxiety and mental health needs. We'd never get to sit and eat lunch because often they have eating disorders and problems with eating, but they're going in and they're having breakfast together in the hall in the morning, they're having lunch together. We've got young people from Step Ahead currently in T-Glass who were very clear when we moved into the building. They wanted to be separate from everybody. They wanted to know there was security there. Now talking about whether or not they could do some work with pupils who were in primary that came from Avrin. So that social development is phenomenal, really, and it's just lovely to see young people settle. Last week we started talking about a range of children. We've already started reintegrating, but as we've got more children started to reintegrate into mainstream, we've got the interest of other children, and we've got some interest from some older young men who we didn't actually think would go back to mainstream. And they are now working really, really hard towards that. And this week we've taken one to their mainstream secondary school. He'll be going into year 10 in September. He was described as a transformed pupil. And it's not just the service that he's had from us, but it's his own ambition that we've been able to nurture to get back into mainstream, to sit his GCSEs with his peers, and watching him with, being shown round his mainstream school by the head there. The assistant head that took him round said it probably was the pinnacle of his career, and he almost felt like a proud dad watching this young man, complimenting the school on what they could offer. And the initial offer that they gave him was less than he wanted, but he was able to manage his own emotions and accept it and be promising to work towards being back full time by September. So that's the difference, I think, the building and the overhaul is making to young people, and that's all I want. Just leave it to you for any questions.
You're on mute.
I was about to say then, sorry about that, I'll repeat. Thanks, Amanda. Thank you very much. And it's good that with the design, you were saying the design and so on, the children were taking, had a hand in parts of that, and that they could then take ownership, which is excellent. I know we've got a number of questions, but Cyril's got his hand up first. Cyril.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Amanda, for that well-presented presentation. On page 20, you talking of challenges, phone line connections and completion of IT. Is that all sorted, or are you still having teething issues with it?
Cyril, I'm going to leave that. I'm going to confess to, in the presentation, what I did, we obviously coordinated because I know Brian and Louise are talking to you about the delivery of the buildings, and I didn't want to talk about anything that they were talking about. So I copied parts of their slides and put it in mine, and I forgot to take them out. So I know that Brian and Louise are going to be talking about that next, but I think everybody is working very much towards that, but I'm sure Brian and Louise will be able to talk more. But yes, we have phones and they're all working.
Thank you, Amanda. Cheers.
Okay, Councillor Mike Dirk.
I'm clicking on all the wrong buttons here. Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask a question about wider EOTAS provision, but I wouldn't ask about that because I think you covered some of the big areas there. How have we integrated the approach, Amanda, across Swansea schools, and what kind of response have you had from heads? You know, the revolving door idea. I mean, has the response been mixed, or has it been universally positive? Can you just give us a little bit of an explanation, please?
It's always been, as far as I'm concerned, and it's always the message I've given since I've been appointed, that that's the remit. And I think what we've done very recently is we've tightened that up. We've got a paper that hasn't been published yet, so it's been with translation and it's ready to go. But certainly we have, I mean, I think, you know, the ongoing response is mixed. Some schools have had quite a traumatic time with the young people that they've referred to us, and they will be concerned about taking those young people back because of what they've experienced. And what we've got to do, and I think that this happened this week, is that when I spoke to the head teacher of the secondary school before the assistant head went up to take the young person around, it was giving him an honest reflection on where that young person is, where we feel, because we haven't got a magic wand, and if they've got ASD, ADHD, if they've got a traumatic life that they're still having, you know, lots of trauma or ACEs going on in their lives, then we've got to be realistic that these young people will still have some difficulties and will still present a level of difficulty. But I think we've got to build a trust in schools. When we say they are ready to go back, they are ready to go back. So we don't just send children, we don't just have a time where they come to us for X amount of time and we send them back. We only send them back when they are ready. And we do that very gradually. So we build a phased approach there. We'll provide support to them in-house when they're in their mainstream setting, so we'll send staff to actually support them. We'll look at where there are likely to be issues. We'll have regular communication with the school, and we'll build up the time. And sometimes it builds up quite quickly over a period of a couple of months, and we can go from, you know, building up from one session right the way to full time. Sometimes it doesn't follow that steady journey because life will happen to that child. So, for example, we've had a number of children who have almost been full-time back but have ended up going into care during that time, and because of that process everything else in their life gets so difficult for them and so challenging that quite naturally their behaviour will become more problematic. And then what we're able to do is bring them back for longer periods with us and lessen the time with mainstream until things stabilise, and then we can increase the time. The other thing we always do is when they are back full time, we give schools half a term, and we have given longer, where we keep their place on roll open for them, so that schools don't feel that they've got to go right the way back to the whole beginning of the process if things don't work. So, and the process is bespoke. It's for some young people it's over a couple of years. For some young people it's over a couple of months. We take it at the readiness of the young person, because the worst thing we can do is send a child back to mainstream when they're not ready and then be referred back, because the whole attachment and sense of exclusion is massive if that happens.
Lovely, thanks, Amanda.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Bev Hopkins. Bev.
Thank you, Amanda, for that presentation. I got to be honest, after seeing some of the provision that we had previously for EOTAS, it is welcoming to see the building that some of our most vulnerable learners are now going to be able to use. And it sounds as if you and the staff, are getting behind it all, and I'm sure it's going to be a great success. But one thing I'd like to ask, being that education has been disrupted so much over many months due to COVID, What are the emerging themes for behaviour support and keeping pupils in school and the PRU unit that you find that you were facing now?
Yeah, I'm just if I just write, because I can look at it from two. So we're looking in terms of behaviour support. There are key emerging themes coming. So young children who haven't had the opportunity to be in school. So we've got a little trend starting of much younger children that are really struggling to engage socially with their peers in school for the behaviour support team. And we are seeing some very much younger children. So we'd got to a point where we weren't having children in foundation phase being referred into the PRU, but we've recently admitted 2 children that are 5, which is something that I want to again avoid at all costs moving forward, so we keep young children in school. But that's largely to do with this. There's been so much disruption, and where there are already chaotic family lives, having those young people at home has exacerbated stress on families. The other big area is anxiety. So young people who already had anxiety and difficulties in attending school, having been home, and often having been educated through the medium of a laptop as an online learning, has actually been in line with their favourite mode, if you like, of communicating and interacting. It's something that they're familiar with in terms of their gaming, in terms of social media. And what we find is that those young people who originally had those anxieties may have been exacerbated by the fact that they've been at home for a long period of time, and by their own concerns around COVID as well, or family concerns around COVID. So that the impact in terms of anxiety and mental health, I think, is well documented nationally, but we're certainly seeing that in terms of the referrals there. In terms of the numbers of people, it's actually had a reduced impact in terms of referrals because children haven't been in school, so the acting out behaviours haven't been a problem to schools, so it's reduced the numbers of referrals to behaviour support team and to the PRU in that sense. And we're under capacity at the moment. It's the first time since I've been in post where we haven't been full to brimming everywhere. So that's the sort of a positive in one way, but I'm anticipating that there will be an increase in numbers. But so far, given that we've had children back and we've had 2 panels, we haven't seen a great increase. The biggest increase that we've had is, as I said, mental health and anxiety. In the PRU, the impact has been the biggest impact has been on our older young people who we were already struggling to hold on to, and we have lost several. They're the young people who were already involved in criminal activities and drugs, and we've really struggled. So we've got 6 children that we've struggled to get back to re-engage at all. So we're working with welfare service, social services, and other support services in order to provide that support. Sorry, thank you. Could you wait 10 minutes? Sorry, just been checked. Could we have a fire alarm test?
Oh.
We'll wait 10 minutes. That's fine.
Great.
So they're a huge concern for us, and our support work team that I referred to, the key workers, they are still working with the families and still working with the young people, and they're still working with the other agencies that are involved. So we've got, whether it be youth offending team, social services, etc. There's close partnership in working with those young people, but they've been the fallout of COVID for us. And then in terms of the rest of it, we actually improved our relationships with parents because of COVID. Because of that, what we had as part of the key worker was we made sure, as part of the RAG rating, every single child that was red had a daily phone call. Every child that was amber had a phone call 3 times a week, and every child that was green had a phone call once a week as a well-being call, on top of all the curriculum communication that we had. So, and where we didn't get in touch with parents, or parents were struggling, we conducted doorstep visits. So we were talking to parents face to face on doorsteps right the way through, and we probably had more contact with parents because of that than we would normally when they're being sent in by a taxi. In the last lockdown, we didn't close. So we kept all 3 centres open. We continued to provide a daily session. So there was a half-day session for every year 11 pupil to ensure that we didn't lose time for them in terms of their GCSEs. And we opened to all of our vulnerable pupils as well as the childcare. So we kept all centres open. And then because the building was ready in February, we transitioned. So we had all children back from February, and we started our transition into the new build. So we've had children in the new build now since February half term. So we've had good time to test the building, good time to test the structure in terms of staffing. And I have to say the children that we were most worried about coming back were the young people with mental health and anxiety needs, because they were coming back to the new build as well. And they all came back. We had, of those children, we only had 1 child that didn't engage physically during the lockdown, didn't come to us during lockdown, but that's because they were in the clinically vulnerable group. So there was good reason for them not coming in, but they've now all come back. And since we've been back, we've now gone through all the pending admissions that we had that were on hold because of COVID, where we couldn't transfer children from school to us during that period. And we've now got all of the children in, so they're all in as well. So we've got all our new children in the building as well.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Greg.
much. Can I call Al Roberts?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Amanda, for that presentation, and to commend you on the Maestero facility. I'm just interested in the relationship that your pupils have with their former schools, if you don't mind, just some brief detail on that. You mentioned sending them back to school, and I'm not criticising any use of terminology or anything. I'm just interested in how present is their former school in their daily or weekly routine. How much contact are they having with that school before they do return, if that's relevant and appropriate?
And totally bespoke and different. So we have some children who come to us from school. So where they come to us from school as part of the admission, what we try to make sure is that they maintain at least a session from the very beginning, so they never lose that contact. We have some children who come to us who have previously been on a PSP or have been with home tuition, so have had very little contact for a period of time with their school, and then they come to us. So we give them time to settle with us, because that in itself is a big step. So they may have had, if they've been on home tuition, for example, or if they're LAC and they've come from out of county, they may not have had contact with their school, particularly if they went into 1 phase. So they started in primary and came out in primary, and then in the meantime, the transition is to secondary. Then we've got some children who their secondary school is a school they've never visited and they don't have a relationship with. So with those children, it's very much starting a relationship and building a relationship with. And then we've got some children who come to us, and they come to us, but from the very beginning, they will maintain a couple of days in mainstream, and then we're building that time up. So the relationships are very, very different. And also the reason why they've come to us will affect the difference in the relationship as well. So if they've come to us with mental health needs, then the relationship tends not to have been as damaged. But if they've come to us, for example, where they've been on the edge of a permanent exclusion and there's been a history of exclusions, then often there'll be quite some damaged relationships that we need to rebuild, not just on the part of the pupil, but on the school as well.
Great, thank you. Councillor Myers-Langston.
Thank you, and Amanda, thank you for your presentation, and obviously for the questions that you've answered so far, particularly in relation to what you've been doing throughout the COVID period. It's really interesting to know, and obviously encouraging what you've been doing. With relation to so how do your teams prevent the behavioural issues that are seen in schools then reaching the point of exclusion? Are there any sort of examples around the measures and actions that your teams are taking?
Do you mean when they're with us in the PRU, and how do we prevent the behaviours happening when they're in the PRU that they see in the mainstream?
Well, how basically how do you basically take preventative action so it doesn't reach a point of exclusion?
For in mainstream?
Yes.
So the behaviour support team will work with young people there, and they'll also work with the staff. So that each school has an allocated time of behaviour support teacher that they can refer to. We're really under capacity with the team at the moment, unfortunately. We had one of the team members is struggling with long COVID, was in intensive care for quite some time with COVID and hasn't returned. And another member of the team had COVID and then had a heart attack as a result of the damage the COVID had done and hasn't returned. So so they're managing across the clusters between them, but we're still offering that support to schools. So they're in schools, they've been in school right the way through, they've been available to schools right the way through COVID, and they'll actually work on whatever the identified need is. So if the child has been identified in terms of anger management and they're having outbursts linked to anger, then they'll work on an anger management programme. If they've got problems in terms of peer relationships and friendships, they might work with the Durham Getting Along programme. And on top of that, then we also run a range of training. So we run the MAPA training for schools with STFs. But in addition to that, what we've done is we've looked at the MAPA is the managing aggression and potential acts of aggression, and it's quite a good training course. What we've done is we've taken the main body of it, which is the preventative element, and then we run that as a mainstream training programme around how do you de-escalate situations, and that's open to all staff as well. So we've got that training for staff, individual support for young people on whatever the need is, and then marrying up. So if, for example, they're working with a group of children with a similar problem in a school, then the behaviour support teacher will speak with the head teacher about running a whole school training programme to manage that element.
Great, thank you, Amanda. Dave Anderson-Thomas.
Thank you. Amanda, thank you for your presentation. My question follows on from Bev's, actually. So have you had any key learning points over the last year that will influence future service provision?
Yeah, I think we already recognised the buildings didn't allow us to do the work that we needed to do with parents because there was no space. There literally wasn't any space in the old building. The new building has got that space built in. And what we've realised as part of the work through COVID is the need to have that relationship, not just to tell the parents how the children have been, and we do that reporting basis, but actually to work with parents more closely in terms of our partnership. So that's very much the work of the key worker will take a key part in that role, but we want to be doing more of that as well, to involve them more in the education of their child. And it's difficult for parents because they've often had, the regular experience of being phoned up and in that, oh, what's he done now experience, and talked at the end of the day. So they can very often be reluctant to engage because they're concerned, they're worried they're going to be told their child has done something wrong yet again. So it's around building that relationship honestly and being able to provide whatever support we need, but also building in the fun elements so we can involve them in the fun elements of the school. So it's working with the children. They've talked about, we've now got the food technology room. We've never had that before. They're loving it. We have our big, tough 16-year-old boys in their puffer jackets, and they come in and they strut around, and their language can sometimes be a bit choice, and then they go into the food tech room and they put their aprons on, they wash their hands without a second thought. They never cause a problem. And we had carrot cake yesterday, which was really lovely. And they're talking about doing things like afternoon teas for parents, breakfasts for parents, and using that as a means of actually having a positive social time with parents, as well as that more formal support in them. So that's a key learning point for us. In terms of our online remote learning package, that for some children worked very, very well. So for our young people with mental health and anxiety difficulties, and for some of our primary children, they really engaged very, very well in that. So we've worked with, but the flip side was we had some children who we felt could have benefited from it, but they couldn't engage with it because the parents didn't have the knowledge and understanding to keep them safe online, to be able to support them through navigating the IT. So we've worked with Aero and we meet together as a regional group of PRUs, and we'd all identified the same. So we've got some money and we've been able to use that money from Aero to purchase some devices, and we've got a digital champion in each PRU now, and their role is to develop the skills with some of the parents that we felt could have benefited from that but couldn't access it. So we can provide them with the device, but the more important part is to provide them with the device and then the support and the knowledge to be able to use that device safely with their person they're caring for. But then as part of that, form a network for them so that we'll have a few parents who can then work together, and we will be able to step out so they can have honest meetings where they can talk about their children with other people who understand what it's like to be a parent of a child with mental health needs or with behavioural needs, without that sense of being judged by a professional. So that's something else that we're working on, and that's great that we're doing that regionally because we've got colleagues that we can share that with. It's fortunate and unfortunate, we managed to get the project up and running just as the whole COVID pandemic started to lessen, and we've got the children back in. So we sort of prioritised getting the children back in and put it on the back burner, but it's certainly somewhere that we need to develop. The other thing that we've looked at then is we've been running over capacity for some time with our home tuition team. So we've got a capacity of 32 pupils for home tuition, and we've been supporting on average 75 pupils, which has put a huge strain on the team, and obviously we're having to get other agency staff in to manage that. But the whole process of going through COVID and looking at how children learned remotely and how you could learn as part of a group remotely, and the knowledge of the impact of isolation on mental health has led to us revising the way we look at home tuition. So instead of having, at the moment we couldn't send tutors into homes anyway from a COVID point of view, but instead of having a provision where they just work one-to-one, what I want to do is start looking at having group tuition, which will mean we can meet the needs within our means of the young people and the numbers that we have, but we can also offer them an opportunity to learn socially and have that social relationship with peers when they're not able to attend school.
Great, thank you. Councillor Jen Rayner.
Thanks, and I'm aware time has gone on because Amanda has spoken very eloquently and fluently about what's going on. I think what is clear to me is we are developing a bespoke service with the child at the centre. All our schools, primary and secondary, are signed up to it and working closely with Amanda and the PRU. The new build offers fantastic opportunities for pupils, staff, dedicated staff, and families to work together. But in all of these things, we have to remember education isn't just a magic bullet. Many things will impact on how these children behave. Family life, peer groups, whole sorts of independences. And the system has to be ready to react sympathetically and supportively across it. So this is a critical education development, but it needs whole county, all education, all schools to make it work. And I think we're on the right track, and I think a lot of that is down to the drive and dedication of Amanda and her team. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Could I just add one thing? Sorry, Chair.
No, absolutely, Mike.
I can't let Councillor Rayner say that without me acknowledging Councillor Rayner's part in getting this ball moving. How many years ago? 5 years ago. Vision, foresight, 4 options maybe in that original report, 5 options, and we went for the top option. And the idea there, we're at the end of that journey now. We're trying to start somewhere. So I've got to say, Jen, I know, look at Jen's face. I've got to say, Jen, you know, that seeing the future, having a step ladder in the maze and seeing a way forward is really important. And we're at an important phase now for our most vulnerable children, pupils in Swansea, and it's exciting to be where we are. So I just had to say that, and do apologise, Chair.
Great.
Thanks. And I have to come back. It's not me, it's Cabinet, it's the whole council, and it's every head teacher and senior leading staff and social worker in Swansea on this ball.
Great, thanks, Jen. And can I thank Amanda for some really comprehensive answers there to some probing questions. So thank you very much indeed, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Can I just echo really what Councillor Dirk has said, and it was something that I said to the people who joined us yesterday for the opening. The children understand the investment that the council, Swansea Council, have made, because we've told them, we've involved them, and they know that investment. And I think it's important that they understand the investment, because that tells them that they are valued by them, and as do our staff. Some of the staff cried when they first walked into the building because of COVID. They weren't able to come in and see the building during the building phases. The first time they saw it was when it was open, and they came in to see their classes. And we had staff, one member of staff who's been with us for over 20 years, and walked in, and she went in and she cried, and she said, we can do so much more for our children now. So it's a massive thank you from us in terms of the investments being made by Swansea Council. But I think it's also important that you recognise that it's not just us that recognise it, it's across Wales. So I sit as part of the regional group and a national group of PRUs. And what's been done in Swansea has been very much noted and watched by our regional counterparts and our national counterparts with a lot of interest. And I think there's a lot of, you know, we've all had moments where we thought, are we doing the right thing, bringing all centres together, having that mixed model and that whole age phase through. But I can say it's working, that I keep touching wood. The transition has been much easier and far better than we ever dreamt it would be. And the results we're already seeing are very positive, but they are being watched nationally as well as regionally, and I think people are going back. And I know that regionally we've got my counterparts going back and saying to their councils, we want the same investment in the service as Swansea have given theirs. So thank you. You've probably caused a lot of problems to other councils, but from my Sterw, I'd just like to say a huge thank you for the investment that you've put into what is a small number of people at a time where finances are scarce. So thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is an update on 21st Century Schools programme. And could I welcome Brian Rolls and Louise Herbert-Evans? And I don't know who's going to give us a brief first. Brian.
Should I start off first, if I may?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm just sorry. Okay. I'm just also trying to lift up the slides onto the screen for you. So apologies. I'm just trying to do that now. Hopefully, it is quite a big file, so it may take a little bit to come up. Hopefully, that's doing it. Anyway, I'll talk. Oh, hang on, what's going on here?
It's all this technology.
I've not got a clue what that means. I'll just press a button and hope. Right, I think something is happening there. Right, sorry. That just shows you my quality of skills in technology, I'm afraid. But anyway, basically, I'm gonna start and provide a little bit of a broad overview, if I may, and context to the programme and the you know where we are with the programme, the impact that we're beginning to see, and it's really pleasing and it works quite well. What it's about is the quality of learning experiences for our children and young people, and you know, there's no way I couldn't have said it any better than Amanda has shown in the points she has made already. All out at the end of the day. So after I've done that sort of broad overview, Louise is then going to take us through some of the specific priority schemes and where we are with those. Then I'm going to come back on a bit on the next steps in the programme, some of the challenges and risks that we face and we're managing. And then Louise is going to round it off with some updates on some other capital investment streams, because obviously we're trying to be coherent with all of this. Right. You may well find if they ever appear on the screen.
We're losing you, Brian. You're frozen out.
It's taking an inordinate amount of time to come up.
Do you want me to see if I
Sorry
can
about
put it
that.
up? I'll try and put it up, shall I, if you're struggling?
Right, it doesn't appear to be wanting to load up very well at the moment.
Let me try from this
Right.
end. I'll try from here. One sec, I've got it up.
Well,
ready.
it says it's doing it, but it's just
Oh,
taking forever. It is.
if it's quite a big thingy, it might struggle.
Okay. So
I'll give it a try, see if it'll do it on mine, in case you've got a dodgy connection. Let's have a look. 21st century schools.
Ah, there we go.
You got it?
Yes.
There we are. Let me just share the view. Let's have a look. Slideshow. Where's my slideshow button?
Oh, thank you.
Oh, we don't want that, do we? Nope. Sorry. Doesn't seem to be wanting to. Oh, here we are. I've got it. Yeah, we are. From the beginning. There we are.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Michelle. Right, that's a relief. Right, can you go to the next ones, please?
We're losing you, Brian, a bit.
Slide. Right, no, that's better. Right, just the first. That's perfect. Thank you very much. Right, can you hear me now?
Yes, no, perfectly. Thank you.
Yes, great. Right, sorry about this. Right. First point, really important. This is a long-term program, as you'll appreciate, and you know, and that's what you'd expect. And so, so in a sense, we have been working on this for some time, and it takes a while for it to sort of come to fruition, so to speak. And we're also trying to complement not just the 21st Century Schools programme funding, but also any other sources of capital investment funding streams that we can access, and as well as that, the annual structural maintenance programme. Now, if you look at the size of the scale of the investment, Band A of the programme was £51.5 million, and that specifically benefited 9 schools across Swansea. Now, we've completed that, we're through that band, and then we worked hard so that we had a seamless transition into Band B, because at the end of the day, these are just artificial distinctions, that this is an ongoing programme. And Band B is nearly £150 million. There has been a slight change with Band B with what's termed the intervention rates. that all that means is the percentage of the funding that the Welsh Government puts into the pot, as opposed to what is expected to be found locally by Swansea. In Band B, we've got a 65% contribution from the Welsh Government, whereas in Band A it was a 50% contribution. There's a higher contribution from the Welsh Government in respect of those schemes in relation to additional learning needs, specifically special schools, and in the case of the Pupil Referral Unit. We've also got a different twist in Band B, because there's 2 sources of funding. There's traditional capital funding, and there's what's termed the mutual investment model, and that attracts a Welsh Government contribution at a higher rate of 81%. I'll come back to that a little bit more as we go through the slides. And then for voluntary aided sector schemes, the contribution rate from the Welsh Government is 85%. Could you move to the next slide, please? Perfect. Now, as you can see from that, our Band B programme is almost 3 times the size of Band A, and we're delivering that with less capacity and resources within the directorate. So, which is all credit to the team in terms of how they've kept us on track with this. And in spite of the impact of COVID, which we've had to manage as well, we have delivered or committed £54.8 million of the Band B programme. That includes the Welsh Medium Capital Grant, and the Reducing Infant Class Sizes grant is included in that. And then on top of that, we are developing detailed business cases to access a further £52.5 million of the Band B funding envelope. Now, if you take all of that together, that represents 73% of the total programme. If you put the aided sector scheme to one side, which is quite an achievement when Band B started from April 2019. So we haven't hung around. We've worked hard to basically draw down and access that funding at the earliest opportunity, because this really can transform the learning experiences of our young people. So thank you. Next slide, please. Right, and as I mentioned, we try to make sure that all our investment is complementary to each funding stream. I do have the question asked of me from time to time of, well, it's all right if you're one of the schemes that's specifically getting a brand new facility from the programme, but what if you're one of the schools that's not kind of in the programme directly? What's the value to me? And there is a significant value, because by us investing in the prioritised way that we have done, it has allowed us to objectively prioritise and plan for the use of the annual capital structural maintenance funding that we have available each year, and that has been used very effectively on a very planned basis rather than a reactive basis, which has a much wider benefit then across our schools throughout Swansea. And you can see that clearly from these figures here. During the Band A period from 2012 to 2019, we had improvement works on 89 of our schools, with a spend in total of nearly £23 million. Now, since April 2019, including this financial year, for Band B, we will have works on 63 schools with a total spend of more than £14 million. Now, that's because as well we've benefited by one-off additional injections of resources, both by Swansea Council but also by the Welsh Government. But I hope you can see there that this is the way we're trying to complement and really maximise the impact it has on the enhancement of facilities across all our schools. Now I'm gonna hand over to Louise now to take us through some specific schemes. If we go to the next slide, please, Michelle.
Thank you. So this is Gosainen Primary School that some of you may have seen or seen images of. We've got the Learning Street is the right-hand picture, which is the way that we're building in a lot of our learning resource areas into our new primary school builds now. If you want to go on to the next slide, Michelle. So Gosainen Primary School is a 1.5 formentary that's future-proofed to 2 formentary, and we've done that by building what I call the common areas, which is things like the halls and the generic spaces, so that they are big enough if at a future point in time we want to add additional classrooms, that those parts of the schools are large enough to accommodate the additional pupils. And this is one of our Band A schemes, and I think it's proof of the pudding that it's a long-term programme, because we were in fact ready to start on site in Gosainen in the 2016, but we had a number of issues with Village Green applications that took a number of years to resolve. And we started on site. We started to put the new relocated playground in April of 2019, and then we started on the school site properly in, I think it was July 2019. In terms of challenges, COVID did have an impact in terms of the construction programme. It was originally programmed to be completed July of 2020, in fact, but we were forecasting an early completion at that stage. So there was a slight delay there, which was largely around, I think, the contractor getting their processes in place, a few issues with the supply chain. But by and large, this project on site went relatively smoothly. In terms of community benefits, because all of our projects we build in community benefits, there are specific benefits in terms of working with the Beyond Bricks and Mortar team to employ apprentices, offer work experience opportunities and the like. They've been more difficult on all of our projects during the COVID period, but nevertheless there are specific community benefits that we've delivered for the immediate community in Gosainen. Obviously touched on the new recited playground. We have the Muga and the car park, which are open for community use out of school hours. And there's also the 2G there that is available for community use through booking and payment, obviously to cover the cost of maintaining that facility out of school hours. So we can go on to the next slide, which is the image that you've seen already from Amanda of my stairoo. So we can probably skip on to the next one then. So the new build for the Prue, my stairoo, has been a very challenging project. Not least, it's been impacted by the original contractor administration, which in terms of when that happened, it was after the initial demolition had been done. So in terms of timing from our perspective, it wasn't too much of an issue. It would have been, the impact of that would have been greater had the main construction works commenced. And then obviously the impact of the pandemic. This project did suffer more delay through that. We're reporting a 20-week delay, again, potentially around the contractors organising themselves on site, obviously having fewer operatives in certain areas. There was certainly one team at least, one subcontractor that they had to go into isolation, so we lost them for a couple of weeks on site. And also supply chain issues. Amanda touched on the phone line and IT issues there. They fall into two halves really. The first, I would say, around the actual provision of the infrastructure, which I've learned quite a lot recently around this, but that rests with BT Openreach as part of the PSBA, the Public Sector Broadband Agreement. And that is an extremely frustrating issue that we have, because we are very much tied to the dates and the speed with which BT Openreach can come to site, engineers can get there, and work can be undertaken. And the other side of that is obviously the digital transformation team and the servicing of the project from their perspective, which that in itself is quite complicated because it involves a number of teams, the network, the server, and other teams. There are all sorts of different skill sets that are involved, and those teams are also involved in business as usual. We have had a review meeting with Joe Harley around this, looking to see if there are any lessons we could learn, because this was certainly probably the most challenging in terms of IT. And Joe's team are also seeking to try and review processes with BT. And that's not the first time we've done that, and that's not the first time we've tried to improve, if you like, the timing of the different requests that go in to get phone lines installed and so forth. But we're certainly going to revisit that again. Other challenges, I think it's probably worth noting that the PRU is a very unique project. It's unique in a number of ways. As Amanda mentioned, it's unique in terms of its model, the fact that we're bringing a number of cohorts together on one site, and also unique in terms of the way that the building works. So there was a lot of complexity in terms of planning the M&E and other elements. And one of the things that we find as a general point is that it's quite difficult to satisfy all the requirements that we have for a build, because quite often they conflict with each other. So, for example, safeguarding requirements conflict with fire safety requirements. It was an even bigger challenge for this. And I think what I will say as well, we had that 20-week delay, and I think Maesteru, like some of the other projects that are on site now, because of COVID, what has been difficult, we've had to change our way of working. So whereas before, if we, the client teams, the contractor, any consultant teams were meeting to look at particular design elements, we would usually meet on site or at a school, and we would have our plans and would be able to talk through them, and that was a process that worked well. So doing that on a Teams meeting, you know, if you can imagine now you're looking at a screen, if you're looking at a very detailed plan and a drawing and trying to talk through that, that has been quite challenging. Obviously, we've changed the ways of working. Certainly going forward, you know, we would aspire to have a mix and match of that, because there are certain work streams that are very difficult to do with that methodology. But we did it and have adapted to that, and have achieved ultimately what we aim to achieve. The STEM engagement for Maesteru, the engagement with the contractor and the school in terms of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, has been more difficult. Kia have shared activities with the school, but that has been more difficult to do that through the COVID period. And so we go on to the next slide. We've got Tanalan. We've had some quite nice images of Tanalan. If you just go back, we've been able to get drone images of our builds, which has been quite useful, particularly now when people haven't been able to go out and see progress. So it's been quite useful to sort of monitor for others, for wider teams and stakeholders, how things are progressing. So moving on, Michelle, please. Tanalan is one of 4 projects now that remarkably we managed to get a start on site in June or July of 2020. And the Tanalan is due currently. We've taken a report to Cabinet that has been approved in terms of the implementation date for this, which is February 22, which is just after the spring half term. We probably expect that Tanalan will complete before then, and we may be able to move pupils into the schools sooner than that. Just moving my slides on as well so I don't lose my notes here. There's been good progress. The roof work is substantially complete. Brickwork, screeding and landscaping is progressing. I did go out to Tanalan a week or so ago, and I think what was very good to see was the progress that's been made in terms of the external works and the landscaping, so that by the time that pupils move into the school, some of that should be more established. Challenges, similar sorts of challenges really. The phone and IT issues, obviously, which we're seeking to mitigate. M&E has been, the M&E design has been hard work, I think, on a number of our current projects, but again, that is being managed and we are working through that. Community benefits and STEM engagement for Tanalan. There are plans in place. We're looking at a project to, obviously with the contractor, Kia, to create some change facilities in the STF at Clace Primary School. And also there's a potential project working with Grace Church to support some remodelling. I think that's going to be more professional advice than actual physical work there. There's been a little bit more in terms of STEM engagement with pupils, being done very differently, remotely, virtual engagement activities, with learning activities, and school competitions, and also we've undertaken some virtual work experience with Bishop Vaughan. So our next Welsh Medium project on site is Tidai now. That started on site similar time of year. The forecast completion dates for Tidai now are currently, well, they're moving. It was around about the same as Tanalan. We've got an implementation date of February 22. At the moment, our draft transition plan is to move that school in October, but anything can change. So it's really sort of watching and monitoring progress. But again, progress has been good, and obviously you'll have seen from the image there that the steel frame is up, the roof is ongoing, and the bus park construction is underway. In terms of community benefits for Tanalan, the contractor, which in this case is Morgan Sindall, sorry for Tidai now, beg your pardon, is looking at potentially doing some work in two nearby local community halls, and there has been some virtual STEM engagement with the school. The contractors worked with the school to develop a new school logo, which will be part of the signage for the new build. There's been an environmental talk and presentation, and a safety talk and presentation is planned for the near future. They've also created an activity pack for pupils to work on site. So Ysgol Gyfan Goer, you can see from there the new pitches have been completed. We've got a Muga, a 2G and a 3G pitch there, which was necessary from the point of view that we're clearly using up more of the external space at Goer, and it's already a constrained site. So we needed to compensate, if you like, for that by creating those all-weather pitches. And we'll be working with the school there in terms of looking at opportunities for community use. Goya started on site 29th of June 2020. The construction on that is due for completion at the end of this year, with phase 1 due to be handed over in September. And you can probably just see from that image, there's the to the right of the pictures, there is, I don't know if you want to go back, Michelle, just so that you can see that, there is the new build block on the right hand side, which is an additional 8 classrooms with dining facilities. So that project specifically to build in additional capacity. The final phases of that project, once that new build is handed over, will be to undertake some further minor remodelling, because if we work to building bulletin guidance, which is the standard for size and spaces. So obviously when we do work such as this, we try to fit appropriately to that guidance. In terms of community benefits and STEM engagement, there has been some work done at, I'll probably say that this incorrectly, Rekabite, I'm sure maybe Councillor Jones can correct me on that hall, with further work to the kitchen area planned for later this year. Right. And similarly, there's been STEM engagement undertaken virtually with the school. So if we want to move on to Bishopston Comprehensive School. This was particularly challenging with COVID, because at the time we submitted the final stage of our business case, that was a few months into the first lockdown, and Welsh Government had a number of funding moratoriums. And it was quite critical for that project that we achieved a start on site ahead of the school summer holiday period, because a significant amount of work had been done with the school and the contractor to come up with an agreed phasing, and there are more than 7 phases within that project. And the first phase, and you will have seen on that first on the image there, is the new block. And we wanted to get that new block installed so that pupils then could move into that to free up areas within the main buildings then, so that we could then work our way gradually through the school. And one of the challenges there was that was a modular build. And anybody that's local to Bishopston would have seen the huge crane that lifted those modular sections in, and there was a whole set of vehicles that were coming down Fabian Way with them one weekend over the summer period. So that modular block has been handed over to the school, and you'll see from that image as well there, you can just see the steel framing for the new reception area at the front of the school. Just checking there, so we've got phases 1 and 7B completed and handed over. And as I say, it's very complicated. That project is due to be completed in October 22. So we haven't had a significant delay due to COVID, but it nevertheless is very difficult to manage that, just to make sure we fit those phases in at the right time, so we minimise the impact on the school. Community benefits. We've got a nature garden project at Bishopston Primary School, and a garden canopy project at the secondary school. And similarly, we've undertaken STEM engagement virtually. So, Brian, do you want to move on to remaining Band B?
Yes, thank you. Perfect. Yeah, as you'll appreciate, with a programme like this, we clearly have to phase the task, the scale of the task. So there's a tremendous amount of work needs to go into developing the detailed business cases to simply access the funding and draw it down from the Welsh Government, and let alone then when you get onto the detailed delivery of the schemes themselves. So at the moment, we've got business case development in progress for a scheme at YG Brintelly, also for Gowerton School, and we are working hard on the investment in our special schools as well. Now then, as we've done with all our schemes here, the projects are determined reflecting an objective sort of assessment matrix, really, which reflects our ongoing planning of school places across the county, where we have surplus places, where we don't have sufficient places, where there are suitability issues or condition issues, and also importantly where there's the opportunity and we have a deliverable scheme that we can develop, which is a really important factor as well. Clearly, all of this is to identify those areas of greatest need and benefit for learners. So those options are being scoped for the remainder of the Band B programme, but also we're already beginning to think how we can seamlessly transition into Band C. Well, we're assuming there will be a Band C, even though we don't know quite when the turnover change year will be for that. If you could have the next slide now, please, Michelle. Thank you. Yeah, I mentioned about the mutual investment model previously, and this is an alternative means of funding an element of the Band B programme nationally. So as well as having the traditional capital funding source, which is effectively borrowing, this is one where there is no contribution, no payment up front as such, but there is an annual charge that is incurred once the building has been delivered and has been occupied. It begins to be in use. Then there's an annual charge which would include not only effectively paying for the investment that has gone into that new build, but it also pays for the ongoing maintenance of the facilities, so that over a 25-year period, at the end of that period, the facilities will be in as good a state as they were at the start. So it's a different way of coming at the funding of the programme, and the rationale for the Welsh Government, I guess, was that in a sense it meant that Band B could be a larger investment envelope, if you like, than it would otherwise be if we were reliant solely on the traditional capital funding. Now, that's quite a complex model to put in place, and the Welsh Government has been working hard on this. They've established a strategic partner which will be delivering these schemes that will be funded in this way. As a council, Cabinet have approved signing up to this partnership. That happened in September last year. Clearly, you have to be in it to win it, so to speak, and so to have the opportunity of benefiting from this form of funding to deliver the schemes, we have to be signed up as a partner. What that means is that the Director of Place is a representative, well, a participant representative, I think the term is, to sit on the strategic partnering board, and that means we can influence the way in which this is delivered nationally. the schemes that potentially would be appropriate for this form of funding would be those where you're talking about a new build, and where it's a discrete new build, not an extension to an existing building, and ideally on a clean site where there aren't any legal or ownership issues. So there is a bit of a limitation in terms of what it can be appropriate to fund in this way, and that's a bit of a complication, because you'll appreciate we've got to pitch the right schemes to be delivered through the right funding mechanism, if you like, if the programme isn't complicated enough already. The other point is that you need this to be in a discrete sums of investment for there to be the interest in the market to fund it this way. So we're talking about packages of schemes or investment of at least £15 million. So sorry, I've probably said more detail than you remotely interested in there, but I think it just shows the complexity that we're dealing with this element of the programme. Could you move on to the next slide, please, Michelle? Great, thank you. And this is just really just to headline some of what we see as probably the most significant risks and issues that we're trying to manage. Louise has touched on some of these as we've been kind of talking through the specifics of the schemes, and I think you can see all too well from that just how good a job the team has done to keep on track with these schemes, with everything that has been thrown at us during the time. It's capacity and resilience within the council. I mean, I've mentioned it in relation to Louise's team, as I say, which is doing a marvellous job with less capacity really than we had for delivering Band A. But there's also there's a lot of other teams within across the council that support the delivery of this programme, and they are equally challenged at the minute in terms of capacity and resilience. Not simply because of COVID, but just simply the scale of the investment and the programmes that they're seeking to deliver on. Now that's one capacity resilience matter. But then if you look at the construction industry itself, of course, we've got a major investments here across Wales, and then there isn't an issue really about capacity and resilience, outside of the authority to deliver investment on this scale as well. So I think it's only fair to recognise that. We've got there the third point, the possible funding risks, especially in relation to the Welsh Government capital funding. Now, we've tried to manage that simply by getting our hands on the money and drawing it down as soon as we can. There's no suggestion at the moment that the pot's sort of running dry, but it clearly makes sense to get our hands on it quick. Apart from the fact that we clearly want to benefit children at the earliest possible stage with those enhanced facilities that we're delivering. And then the fourth one, in terms of developer contributions and timing uncertainty in relation to those, as I said at the outset, we're trying to make sure we make the fullest possible value and output from all the different capital investment funding streams we have available to us. And there is a funding stream which is through the developer contributions, and we want that to seamlessly and coherently sort of support our priorities that we've identified and we're delivering through the whole long-term programme. But as I say, there's another complication there clearly, because development don't sort of go nicely to time scale, and certainly not necessarily to the time scale we would like to tie it into our programme. So there's a bit of a challenge facing us there, but it's one that we're up for and we'll keep on the top of, and I'm sure we'll get there. Right, I'll shut up again after that, and Louise is just going to touch on a few wider examples of those investment streams.
Yeah, thank you. So the next two slides are relative to investment streams that fall outside of the main part of the programme, currently Band B. And it's interesting this because it does cause us a challenge. What we've got here is reducing infant class sizes and then 2 Welsh medium projects, because we get an invitation from Welsh Government to submit a bid, usually with fairly short notice, and obviously in that period of time we then have to scope and cost and obviously set out the business case for that, which is difficult. And then obviously you go through the approvals process, and quite often by the time you get to the approvals process, you've then refined your cost plan. Time has moved on, and so has the cost plan probably moved on as well. We have recently given some feedback to Welsh Government on that. They've undertaken a survey around that, and our feedback to them is that, you know, we would prefer it to see that if there was additional funding, for it to be strategically aligned to existing programmes, so we can complement existing programmes. So the reducing infant class sizes, the funding envelope is now 1.9 million. I can't remember quite what it was originally, but we did go back to Welsh Government because over the course of time, and obviously in terms of undertaking more detailed work for those schools, the initial cost plan wasn't quite sufficient. But we've now completed the first 3 of those schemes: Penrail, Hendref and Seaview. And Brynjago is now on site. I mean, in the case of Brynjago, the original scope that we had, we changed that. We undertook quite a bit of work in terms of design, and then had to review that, and then came up with a scheme now that is currently on site. So that's due to be completed in October 2021. And then moving on to the next slide then, the Welsh medium schemes. These are 2 of 4 Welsh medium schemes, in fact. And the other 2, we were able to strategically align them because they supported the Band B projects that we talked about earlier, YGG, Tanlan and Tydino, which enabled us to increase the capacity further for those 2 schools. There is a risk here that what has now been approved, because this was a very long approvals process and complicated, I think it probably took 18 months, 2 years. There is a risk now that those cost plans really aren't fit for purpose, and we may have to go back to Welsh Government and have a further conversation with them. And of course the construction market is very volatile at the moment, and obviously supply chain challenges and inflation there. So we're currently at the stage now with both of those schemes, which are to add additional capacity of 60 places for each. There's the further design work is currently undergoing, and then we're going to have a cost plan review and see where we are. But the start on site for both projects is programmed for April 22. With a slightly longer programme of works for Bryn y Mawr. And then the next slide, we've got the LDP Strategic Sites. So Brian touched on that in terms of the LDP contributions. We've got some significant strategic sites as part of the current local development plan. And we have worked very closely with planning in giving education feedback over many years through the process of the establishment of the local development plan. And we're currently at the point that we have signed Section 106 agreements for 3 sites. Strategic Site B in Garden Village, where there is a 2.5 form-entry primary school shown on the strategic master plan for that site. The developer contributions are calculated using the SPG, the Supplementary Planning Guidance, and that developer contribution is 5.5 million. So there is a contribution shown as part of Band B as well to enable that to be delivered. It's very complicated. We've got draft project plans for all of these sites, but all we can really do is just monitor what is happening on site and when those triggers are going to take place, so that we can respond in a timely fashion, so that we can secure that contribution and what is needed to meet the additional pupils arising from that development. And then we've got Strategic Site D, Kevin Gavelach, which I'm informed is, if built out, around about the size of Usk, with 1,950 units. For that, we've got the developer is required to provide a 2.5 form entry primary school there. It's on a three form entry site at unit 800, and then we've got Strategic Site C in Penllygare, which similarly is a 2.5 form entry primary school. But all we can really do for those at the moment is monitor what's happening, work closely with planning, and obviously be prepared then to respond at the right time. And I think that's it to them.
Great. Could I thank both Brian and Louise for, again, a really comprehensive report. We've got a few people who want to ask questions. Could I ask Steve Gallagher to come in first, Councillor Steve Gallagher?
Yeah, thank you for that. It was interesting, and it's surprising how we've kept everything going during this last 18 months. But I would like to ask, and you've mentioned about COVID has affected a number of areas, but in relation to any future projects or current projects, how has that affected any current class availability, if it has?
I'm not sure it has. I'm not quite sure I follow that, if I'm perfectly honest. I don't think it has, as far as I can see.
No, you know, obviously the work schedule has been affected by COVID, and a lot of the new builds and extensions, etc., has been affected. So currently, there's obviously class availability in place, and does the COVID and the extensions, has it got any effect? And if it hasn't, that's absolutely fine, because I know Louise has mentioned a number of areas which have been delayed, which is expected.
So the two where we experienced the delays were the two that were on site at the start of the lockdown, which was Gosainen and Meisteru. And obviously in both of those cases it wasn't, the projects weren't so much about space, it was around the suitability of the existing space and the condition of the existing space. So our biggest concerns there were making sure those existing buildings survived till we could move the pupils across, which they did, thankfully. But obviously that was, we were monitoring, and mitigation works were in place for that. So there was no impact there. And then in terms of the other 4 projects that are currently on site, all of those were on site within 3 months of the first lockdown. So, remarkably, and I think it is remarkably, we achieved that and got them on site, and then we're not experiencing any delays now. And I think certainly in March, April, May, June, or July of last year, this was new to us, wasn't it? But I think, as I said earlier, we've developed new ways of working. We've worked around it. Certainly, when we have the opportunity, there are certain things we'd want to do, perhaps in some of the older ways. But it's like, I guess it's like the blended learning, isn't it? Some is good, some is bad, and it's what fits. But there's no impact because of COVID on the 4 projects that are on site.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Myers-Langston.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation and the update. And it's positive to see the work that's been done, investment that's been made. The question I've got is relating to how you calculate where to put new schools and where to sort of put these maintenance upgrades. I'm a local governor. This week we're discussing many of the sort of maintenance issues that we're sort of facing at the school. And if they're not included, what sort of benefit could we potentially see for the smaller scale maintenance requirements?
Right. If I could perhaps kick off that, and then if there's any more detail, I'm sure Louise will come in as well. As I was trying to explain, you know, a bit earlier in the slides, by addressing some of the major structural condition suitability issues through the major investment schemes, it has enabled us to make an increasingly planned and effective use of the available annual structural maintenance funding, and that has been enhanced, particularly in recent years, by one-off additional injections of funding, which have made a huge difference as well. All of that has helped us to address backlog issues which otherwise were there. Clearly, there's still an awful lot still to be done, but it's made a huge difference. And that annual structural maintenance programme that is allocated on a very objective, prioritised basis, which reflects the latest condition survey information across all our schools, as well as wider suitability assessments and so on, and to prioritise those works, you know, in relation to the amount of funding that is available. And so as I say, that's the way that kind of works. In terms of the actual major investment projects, I mean, I mentioned there that we have a series of complementary assessments which we take account of, and you know, in terms of identifying the potential options and also the priorities for future major investment in school facilities, and I mentioned about you know, the opportunity and deliverability, because we may well have a priority for a particular investment, but if we haven't got an appropriate site or a way of actually delivering that, then in a sense it can't go up to a deliverable priority, if you see what I mean. So we still have to continue to work on that to find a deliverable solution. You mentioned about location of schools as well. I mean, what we utilise all the data that we have available to us, really, in terms of the current catchment area, data, the pupil distribution. We make good use of pupil distribution maps, seeing where the pupils are actually coming from who attend each schools, etc. We have our projections in terms of trends, in terms of numbers, where we have surplus places, where we don't have sufficient places, and so on. And as I say, if we've got basically you know, a constrained school site currently, and we require a less constrained site to actually do something about enhancing those facilities, well, clearly we've got to find an access and be able to access that appropriate site. So that comes into the account as well. So it's quite a, you know, it's quite a complicated sort of picture to sort of work through to come up with it. But as I say, we use all the objective data and assessments that we have. No single assessment is adequate in itself. We have to use a lot of complementary assessments, and you know, and we also engage, you know, with stakeholders through this process as well, because in my experience, the more input you have through that process, the better the actual decisions and the choices that come out of it. So I hope that makes some sense. I mean, I'm sure others will.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks. Next, Councillor Bev Hopkins, then I'll call Councillor Jen Rayner. Hi, Bev.
Sorry. Hi. Thank you both very much for that presentation. What I was wondering is, how does Swansea fare with the rest of Wales, where with putting together this all the new builds and everything? Are we on par, or are we ahead of some of our other local authorities?
Well, if I can just come in there. We have regular meetings with colleagues, in Welsh Government, because quite rightly they're wanting to be sure that we are delivering on what we've signed up to on our programme, because they don't want to have funding at the end of the year that's not been spent effectively. And we always have very positive feedback from Welsh Government officials as to our track record in terms of delivering what we say and what we plan to do. So that is a consistent positive track record that we have, and that puts us in good stead. So if we ask for, or if we identify an issue and say, look, this issue's arisen, we need to tweak the funding matrix a little, whatever, there's a credibility there which helps us to work effectively with the Welsh Government. So that's in terms of actual delivery of the scheme. I think we do very well with that, and I think you've probably seen that, the evidence of that through the slides. In terms of the actual scale of the programme, I mean, 150 million is a pretty ambitious scale of investment, and that's purely from Bambi, without the other streams which we're doing our best to get our hands on accessing as well. So I think at the moment I would say we're doing pretty well, both in terms of the scale of our investment in our schools and our aspiration level there. But I would also say in terms of how speedily we are delivering this. It may not seem speedy when you're talking about the number of years that some of these schemes take, but when you think that Bambi started April 2019, we didn't wait about until we got to Bambi to start delivering schemes. We started on all the planning of that well before that, so that we were ready come April 2019 to immediately start drawing down funding in a seamless way from Bambi to continue all that good work that we've been doing previously in the programme. So I think, I feel confident we're, doing very well compared to other authorities in that regard.
Great, thank you. Right, Bev, your
Thank you.
Councillor Jen Rayner, and then after her, Councillor Linda Tyler Lloyd.
Sorry, Chair, I think Linda had her hand up before I went on.
Right, okay, go on, Linda.
I'd be very quick. First of all, I want to say that I think that it's fantastic to see all these pictures of all these wonderful schools. It makes me want to go back to school, because in my days we were still almost on chalk and slates. But also I remember going to school on Town Hill and being tiny and having to go to the school which the seniors were at. And I think that doesn't help the learning process. So I think that it's absolutely wonderful what you're doing. The only thing that I agree with Miles about is that I just hope there's going to be some money for the schools which are in existence, because we've been to Morrison School, I visited Christchurch, and to see these poor schools are struggling and wonderful heads doing the absolute very best that they can with what they've got. But I would just like to think that there wasn't just the fabulous new schools and then the old schools that are struggling. So I just hope, Jennifer, that you've got some plan for that. Perhaps I missed it. It was all so much this afternoon that I missed out on that. But I think wonderful what you're doing with the new schools. Yes, wonderful. I'm so clever during COVID to have managed to do all this. That's all. Thank you.
Any comment, or over to Jen?
Well, shall I? I mean, I did sort of try to explain that by addressing some of the major investment needs, it does enable us to have a much more focused and planned approach to the use of the annual structural maintenance funding. And I mean, basically, we use any opportunity. You can see that probably with the Bryn Moor as one example. In terms of reducing infant class sizes. We've got a constrained site as a limitation in the sense of what we can do to sort of radically transform the whole learning facilities, etc. there, but there was an opportunity there to enhance the facilities, and we took that opportunity. And it may not be a complete new build, but it has can have a really marked effect on the learning opportunities of young people. I mean, I recall vividly visiting one primary school where we had a source of funding which was to do an extension, but as well as the extension, what we did, we reconfigured the way that extension sort of, and how the whole operation of the school worked around, you know, with that extension. And it was really exciting to see how it really did transform the way in which the whole learning was delivered in the school. And it was far more than simply the extension in its own right, if you like. And I think we try and be as clever as we can in that regard to make the most of what investment we can access, but also the way in which we can utilise that, sometimes in very constrained and difficult sites, to sort of do that, if you see what I mean. And unfortunately, there are some that do offer a real challenge, but we don't give up. We'll find a way of doing something, I'm sure. You know, that's what we always do with problems, get around them somehow.
Great, thank you, Brian. Jen.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to Brian and Louise for the excellent slides identifying the work. As Brian has said, preparation starts really early on. The team has a constant oversight of condition and maintenance of all the buildings. So when Band A and Band B started, they had planned ahead, and I think that's really vital because it enables Swansea to get in early the moment we heard about the new scheme, and we could look at the terms and conditions of what they were going to fund in that particular package of grant aid. And that, I have to say, it's a huge job. Before anything is started, the full business case has to be approved with the Welsh Government, which involves months and months of discussions with the school. How is it going? How is any improvement going to support the learning experience and the education experience inside? With reference to the question, were there any problems with the delays about classes? Not really, because this is planning ahead projects where we want to be, best spend of money. Where we thought we would have a delay, which was on Tydino, which was more complicated, not just on the moving in date, because it involved changes in catchment. We took it back to Cabinet and got a few months extra consent before moving things around. But luckily the developers and the support team from education have managed to catch up, and we're back on schedule there. The mutual investment model, which when it was first announced, we all thought, oh, that's interesting. First meeting we went to, we were told no special schools, and every local authority had put special schools top of the list for this scheme. Then we were told has to be a completely clean, cleared site, as Brian has said, with no legal constraints on it. And the funding was only going to be for very large primary schools in excess of 450 pupils, large secondary schools in excess of 800 pupils, or combined all through schools 3 to 16, 3 to 18, which of course throws a whole different view on what we were planning, because in Swansea we have stuck very much to local schools, supporting smaller primaries in particular, rather than having to bus pupils around the authority. And many of our secondaries are already large. The critical pressure points, I think, have been those schools we know we will have to work on, but finding a space and capacity either on site to do the work or an alternative build. Now, you will observe the situation in Gorsinan over a number of years, where the buildings on 1, 2, 3 sites had deteriorated enormously, built up area, no other land except the park and the ownership of the council. And yet that was all we had available that met all the conditions. And the end result is great, but I can think of many schools where it is going to be difficult to deliver big scale work, either without decanting a number of pupils elsewhere, and that's a question of where to. All our inner city skills, which have got close housing all the way around them. Think of Bryn Mill, for instance. Think of Oystermouth. It's tight, it's contained. How do you actually access these sites? These are all the problems that the team have been working on and looking at. And I think they have done a fantastic job during COVID, staying in touch with all the contractors, monitoring the work, sometimes going out on site. I have to say I've been lucky to go out to nearly all the new builds and have been speechless at the incredible progress that has gone on. But it is a very complicated business. The building, once you're on site, is superb, but that's often to do with the improvements in construction techniques. But the preparation work is really where it's hard. And I don't think the team gets sufficient praise for that behind the scenes work. Everyone goes, oh, look at that lovely building, let's have an opening ceremony. But there's a lot of blood, sweat and tears goes on before we even start cutting the turf. So many thanks to this team, very proud to have worked with them.
Great, thank you, Jen, and thanks, Brian and Louise, for an excellent presentation, and for delivering on those schools. So thank you very much. The final item on the agenda is the review of the Education Scrutiny Work Programme. This is obviously the last meeting of the municipal year, and our future work programme will be determined on the 24th of June. So any comments, anyone? Jen, you've got a hand up, or was that
sorry,
historical? Yeah, that's okay. Any comments? Right, well, if there aren't, thank you all very much. Thank Michelle for all the work in getting the meetings organised, and look forward to seeing you in the near future. Thank you. Have a pleasant evening.